Welcome everybody to the PFF College Football Podcast. I'm your host Seth Galina, PFF_Zeth, alongside PFF Diante Lee, coming at me from the West Coast. We're on like in North America. I don't think there's two further parts away from each other than Montreal, Quebec, and San Diego, California.
You might, yeah. I think you're right. It doesn't get more opposite than that.
I was actually thinking because I went out last night. So there's a curfew here. There's an 8 p.m. curfew here.
Oh, good for you guys actually following the rules and being responsible.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing. So I went out with a friend and we went to the park. And like the sun had pretty much already set by this point because it's like the winter, so it sets at like 3 p.m. or whatever the fuck. And so it just like we're like, hey, we'll hang out in the park and we'll drink a bit, and it's so effing cold, dude. And I was thinking about how you live in like literally the number one climate like weather city in the whole. You don't know about like, because now you got normal winter depression, like, which is a real thing and is rough. Mm-hmm. And now you're adding it on like COVID depression, having a curfew, all that stuff. And you're like, nah, whatever. I was gonna San Diego.
I was gonna say I was gonna come in and complain because it was only like 61 degrees today.
61, man.
It was windy. That was the extent. That's the extent of my complaints. It was windy.
That's wild. Honestly, if the PFF offices were not in Cincinnati, which is another cold weather place, I would be there right now. Like if they were in San Diego, they're in Miami, like I would just be there. COVID be damned, because I'm trying to get away from the snow right now. Okay, I have one other question for you before we start things. What video game are you playing right now? Like not like right now, like at this moment, but what's the game you're playing?
Right now it's probably Cold War. I usually don't do the first person shooter thing. I don't have the reflexes that I used to when I was in high school. So I spent a lot of time just getting my ass kicked by, I'm sure, 12-year-olds, with a Mountain Dew in one hand and the controller in the other,
Yeah. Is it good? Is the story good and the multiplayer good?
I mean, it's just like any other Call of Duty, if I'm being honest with you.
Well,
you've played them all.
So, like, I haven't played a lot of the Call of Duties, at least in a long time. I haven't played them. They've all become like sports franchises where you get a new release every year. The story is obviously different. The tweaks are very little probably, and especially in terms of like big engine stuff and gameplay stuff. It's the same game, right?
Exactly. Maybe they throw a few different guns in there. The graphics look nicer. It's brighter and more lush, but it's the exact same game.
I can't believe how hyped I was for like NCAA 06, 07, whatever it was, maybe 05, when you could press L2 and the guy would quiet the crowd or like pump up the crowd if you're on defense. Mm-hmm. That's like, I kept looking back. I'm like, yo, just give me a better game. Like
that's all I'm asking for, That's literally all I'm asking for.
All right. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about Tennessee's futility and I would imagine future futility, given the news that's come out in the past couple of days. Sark, what he's bringing to Texas. Talk a little bit about Chris Olave coming back to Ohio State. Clemson returning all 11 starters on defense. Another futile search, this time with LSU's defensive coordinator. And then we'll get into a little bit of NFL at the end with the conference championship games coming up. All right, so Tennessee, they are done forever. Like it's over for Tennessee. The guys that are leaving, I just saw how many people were leaving. So running back Ty Chandler, this is from Ben Fennell's tweet and Matt Zennett's tweet. Ty Chandler to North Carolina, Wanya Morris to Oklahoma. That's a running back and a left tackle. Jarrett Guarantano to Washington State. And then guys who left today, I guess, would be Henry Tuotuo. Top linebacker recruit Kavaris Crouch. Running back Eric Gray is very good. Offensive lineman Jameer Johnson started a bunch of games for them. So like the fallout has been quick and severe for Tennessee. My question is, what's if you had to pick a fast food chain to get your money from, would it be McDonald's?
Yes, but I mean, seriously, it's unprecedented. Honestly, this is. I don't have. I'm racking my brain right now to try to find like something that will be similar to this, and even teams who have been hit with like the most serious like probation and recruiting violations, I don't think that they've had an exodus like this over one offseason. Usually what you see is like maybe a star player, maybe one or two leave, the most important players on the team. And, it kind of trickles from there. Then the next important players leave the following offseason. And then it really starts to hit recruiting. But, over basically the last 6 days, you've had 2022 recruits decommit basically from the moment that Pruitt was found to be out and Fulmer stepped down. You have all of these transfers. I mean, quarterbacks, running backs, offensive linemen, linebackers, at every position group you can think of. They still don't have an active, full-time, long-term head coach. I mean, these are the types of things that bury programs, and this was already a program that looked like it wouldn't even be able to get to the Butch Jones 9-3 level for a little while. So I really don't know where this leaves them.
Did you like the Pruitt hire at the time?
Yes, actually. I thought that because, and this is me being a high school coach, but I did think that because he was previously a high school coach, especially being from Hoover High in Alabama, I thought that he would have some cachet in recruiting. He had obviously been successful at Florida State and at Alabama. So I figured if nothing else, the defense would be good. And if he can just recruit the way I think he can, maybe they have just enough of an offense to hover around that 8 or 9 win kind of ceiling, especially since Florida is not inept. Georgia has their stuff together. I expected them to be the third best team in the East, and now they're worse than Kentucky.
The thing with you talk about Florida not being inept anymore. They were bad for in the post-urban years. They were terrible. I mean, that's why you have to give credit to Dan Mullen. Like, I'm not going to talk about Florida, but you have to give credit to Dan Mullen because we forget how bad they were. They forget how bad this team was between 2011 and 2017, whatever it was. But like, I think there was the small chance that Tennessee could overtake them, and like kind of in a sense go back to where they were. They would have overtaken. They're not going to overtake Georgia. That's just a machine. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But I thought with Pruitt, and I like Pruitt because I agree the high school thing is cool. There's a guy who worked his way up from Hoover High is like in between like the high schools that we coached at and college. But like, so I thought that was cool. Also, you probably saw this, but he did a clinic that's like floating around YouTube. Talking about, I think it was after his first year at Tennessee, and talking about his coverages and stuff. And he was like very self-deprecating and very funny. And I was like, all right, that's my guy. Like, he make fun of himself.
I thought he was like, okay, he's not a Saban clone. That's really kind of what it was. It's like, I don't think that he is trying to cosplay as Nick Saban. I thought he's enough of his own guy that maybe he would be able to instill some kind of identity at Tennessee.
Yeah, and I heard stuff like just specifically about the defense that he was running, and obviously there's similarities maybe in the language or something like that, but in terms of like Saban likes to run this type of coverage because so and so and so, and Pruitt was like, nah, I'm not about that. Like I want to do like so. There was enough of a difference, like you said, not being a Saban clone. So I thought it was a good deal. I thought the offensive coordinator hiring 2 years ago or 2019. Was not very good with Jim Chaney. And I was looking at their heat maps of Tennessee under Chaney. Like, and I didn't watch so much Tennessee, but like you look at those heat maps, there is no routes, not even throws. There's no routes past 15 yards down the field. And I'm like, oh, right, it's Jim Chaney. Like, so it's like you had your chance. Because you had a really smart defensive coordinator in there who actually turned the defense around from year 1 to year 2. This year, it's a whole different story. but then you bring in this old school offensive coordinator. And do they have RPOs in their offense? I'm sure. Do they have zone read in their offense? Yeah, I'm sure. But like, you got to push the ball down the field in college football right now.
Yeah, like you look in 2021, you can't do run on first down, run on second down, throw to the sticks on third down. That's not a real offense. Even triple option teams know when to push the ball down the field.
So that to me was a big deal. And so, okay, another question. Like, do you think that, let's say it does work out, whether it's with Jim Chaney or he actually hires a better OC at the time, and it does work out and they win a few more games, do they still find a way to fire him now? Or is it like everything's pushed under? Or is this like, all right, this is serious now? Like, we don't have a choice.
I think that he still ends up out because, to me, what success looks like in the SEC East is that you're South Carolina, which means, you're usually 8-4, and then maybe one year you get that recruiting class with the quarterback and you go 10-2. But you still don't make the SEC championship game because you can't beat Georgia. You're probably not going to beat Florida. And if you did make the SEC championship game, you're not beating Alabama or LSU. So, and Tennessee clearly seems to believe that 1998 was not 20 years ago, So that's kind of where they're stuck at.
Why do you think, and I know neither of us are like recruiting experts. Obviously, you're the like Southern California area pretty well, but why do you think this happened to Tennessee? Why do you think it's happened? And is it the same as what's happened to like Nebraska and maybe even Michigan and all these schools like Florida State? Like, is there different? Like, why do you think this has happened to Tennessee?
So like you said, I'm not the recruiting expert, but from what I know, it is the same thing that's happened in Nebraska, that's happened to the Florida schools outside of the University of Florida. I just think that all of these little niche, boutique things that you could do in recruiting before everybody knew where all the good players were, it doesn't exist anymore. You can't go get all the California kids because everybody knows where to look in California. Miami, the Miami area is not a secret anymore.
Yeah, Godfrey on the show, must have been like 2-3 months ago, Stephen Godfrey was like, yeah, not only does every school have a Florida recruiter, they have a Miami recruiter. So right. Like now you can't do the whole state of Miami thing, lock it down if you're the Hurricanes. Now you have to look elsewhere because everyone's in your backyard. And exactly. I maybe that's the same with Tennessee and Nashville. Nashville produces some good football. Tennessee in general produces some good football players.
Absolutely. I mean, and then you think about what's happened with programs around them. South Carolina is better now than they ever were when Tennessee was at its best. Clemson is a thing now. It used to not be a thing, Sure. So you're just starting to see just things get plucked one little by little. The same thing has happened to the University of Texas. Now when everybody is getting better, when A&M's a real program, when Oklahoma is still what it is, it just gets harder. There is no, I'm locking down the state or I'm going to the biggest metropolitan area in my 500-mile radius, and that's me and only me. It just doesn't work that way anymore. And I think that, Tennessee is never going to be a program that's going to be in that 75 to 80% blue chip ratio type of program that Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama is. That's never going to happen. They should be looking at a program like North Carolina and saying, if we can be that, perfect. We'll be exciting as hell. We can score a lot. Maybe we attract 1 or 2 recruiting classes that are special to us, and that's, maybe how we make it. But they're not going to be a power anymore, in my opinion.
I would say, though, there is still more of a chance that Tennessee comes back than Nebraska just because of location. Man, I'm not that we're going to get it. We don't need to get into Nebraska, but like the more you think about it, it's like it's bad there.
I don't know.
Because like I said, like, hey, Tennessee, yeah, they haven't won a lot of games this year, but Nashville's full of talent. Nashville is full of talent.
Right. And Memphis is right around the corner,
Lincoln, too. Nebraska ain't full of nothing, man.
Right. Like, nothing in that radius is, It's like St. Louis, Missouri. It's like the only big city in their radius where they can maybe pull talent. And you're not winning a championship with the best from St. Louis, Missouri. No disrespect to those kids. It just is what it is. If you can't lock down Atlanta, if you can't lock down Houston, if you can't get to, New Orleans and Baton Rouge, if you can't get to Miami, it's going to be hard for you. There's really no way around it.
Okay, let's go to, you talking about Texas. They fire Tom Herman. They bring in Sark. I think we both like what we saw from Sark offensively this year. Now, you as like a USC fan, kind of got the first iteration of Sark. I guess 2 times in the sense that coordinator there and then the head coach. So yeah, what are your general thoughts about Sark going to Texas?
I think the most interesting thing about him is for all the people who were there at USC, he is the one who has evolved the most. And I would think, same for the guys who were off of the Saban coaching tree. So no matter where you kind of want to say, he made his greatest developments, I don't know if anybody has gone through more iterations as a coach than Sark has. So I know when he was at SC after Washington, when he got there, his big thing at the time was using like 2 backs. True, like 2 running backs and using one like out in the flare motion. So all the stuff we see Alabama does where they'll bring like their X receiver or the guy from the boundary and he'll run that orbit motion out to the field. He was doing a version of that at SC. It just wasn't that exactly. And really what I've seen now from him is the RPO stuff out of like 12 personnel. So now he really knows how to kind of get the best of both worlds. He's going to play with the personnel that's going to give him an opportunity to really mash teams with downhill runs. And they've got obviously they have the receiver talent at Alabama to where you can only have 2 on the field and still be a serious explosive passing threat. Will he have that at Texas? Remains to be seen. But from a schematic perspective, I think he has a pretty good grip on how to bend these defenses to his will.
I think what they do a good job. I was talking to a friend about this today, actually. And he was saying something that I think we had said before too. Just like he was doing a really good job of marrying concepts together. Super high play action rate this year. I mean, maybe must have been top 10 in the nation. Something like 50% play action rate. Yeah. And because they're in pistol a lot, it is a downhill type of play action. So you're getting that. Everything's looking the same, and then they're running the whole offense is just deep over routes. When they're not hitting you with RPOs or stuff behind the line of scrimmage, it's all just deep over routes. My question is, does the offense carry over, or does Sark need to reinvent? Like you said, it's some of the concepts are always going to be the same, right? Like no matter what, when you strip it down, you're gonna put in the same stuff you put into every offense, because you have preferences as a coach. But like, can this pretty close to this offense go to Texas, or does he have to strip it down again? And you think he has to rebuild it for honestly lesser talent, or at least like talent that is not the best in the conference?
So I think that he is going to have to make some changes. And to answer your initial thought, they were first in the Power 5 in play action passes. They were actually tops in P5. So no surprise there. That's obviously Mac Jones' strength. That was that offense's strength. So I think that structurally that will be what you see at Texas. And I don't see why it can't work if Oklahoma can do what they do, with all their play action stuff and running gap scheme and playing out of 21 personnel, 20 personnel, 11 personnel with the Y off. So they're just as diverse as Alabama, as Sark has been with Alabama. It might just be a different kind of diverse, but it's essentially the same kind of attack. When it's time to run RPOs, they'll do that. When it's time to be a downhill power run team, they can do that. And when it's time to take shots down the field, that's obviously an option for them as well. So I would expect them to be very efficient. A big difference between Sark and what Herman did with Ellinger is the quarterback run game. That's never really been a big thing for Sark. I don't imagine that he's going to make a change on that front either. So I expect he's going to be recruiting more to the pocket passer type than, a dual threat or more of a runner. So everything else, I mean, I would expect them to be just as efficient as Oklahoma is if they can get the kind of talent that Oklahoma gets.
Okay, this reminds me that I have to make my my case here retroactively for Sam Ehlinger as a Heisman Trophy winner. Okay, because look, you're talking about the heat map. So I was like looking up the Texas heat maps from 2019 and then last year 2020, And I remember now why. Now, look, none of what I'm saying matters because Ellinger's gone and like everything's different now. But I just have to put it out there. You look at 2019, they were running an offense that fit Sam Ehlinger, which was QB run, throw the ball down the field. Yep. QB run, nothing outside short, nothing in the middle, down fucking field. Like, that's it. Yeah. That was their offense. And then you look at the difference this year, and it's like, oh, we tried to be an offense now. Like, no, stop it. Let the man be a college quarterback and do the stuff that's good for him. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's why I thought like this was a dark horse Heisman candidate, because if they continue what Tim Begg did and not change it with Yurcich coming in, I thought senior quarterback. I know the offensive line. The receiving core wasn't great. The offensive line was okay. I thought, okay, this is finally the year. Okay, anyways, let's switch up. Let's go to Texas on defense. I know you just finished watching. Is it Pete Kwiatkowski?
Kwiatkowski, I believe, is a pronunciation. If it's not, don't kill me, Texas fans. I believe it's Kwiatkowski, but I'm not sure. There's a lot of consonants in there.
He comes from Washington, where he was a defensive coordinator. I guess at first, like co-defensive coordinator with Jimmy Lake. Jimmy Lake becomes the head coach when Peterson leaves, and then he just is the defensive coordinator. So you just watched them. What do you think? Now they're when I watch Washington over the years, I see NFL stuff. I'm like, they play it, and this was a stupid thing, but when they play cover 1, cover 3, their safety is deep like an NFL safety. That's what I remember. Now, I don't know if they did it this year. I haven't watched them much this year, but so it's like, so I look at that and I say, hey, this is a team that wants to shut down the run with 8 guys, or 7, 8 guys, whatever, the extra guy, play cover 1, play cover 3, take away all the deep stuff, let that safety take everything top down and play it like that. Is that the same thing you saw?
Basically, so I actually just watched 2019, not this season, because they only played 4 games for one, so the sample size is all messed up, and they had a bunch of COVID issues. So I figured, I'll just strike this year from the record and try to get a better feel for them. I would love to strike
this year from the record, to tell you the truth.
But you're right. I mean, they do play very NFL by the book. Free safety is 18 to 22 yards deep, in the middle of the field, and one thing about them that I like, that I'm interested to see if they're going to try to replicate at Texas, is they don't have any qualms with playing like dime or nickel. If that's who their best 11 is, that's what they do. So if they need to play a 3-2-6, they'll do it. If they need to play, your regular 4-2-5, they'll do it. But yeah, a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 1. When I ran some data on them, about 10% of their coverage snaps was out of cover 2, which is basically at about the same rate that like Iowa State runs theirs. And they're running like true, zone cover 2. Guys are dropping to the hooks and sliding based off of, the quarterback's vision. So that I'm kind of interested to see if that number changes. I think another interesting part about Texas's defense is that their defensive pass game coordinator, I have no idea what these roles mean anymore in college. I feel like nobody is better at creating a job for somebody than the college coaching staff. But Tommy Joseph, who was the DB's coach at Notre Dame, is going to be their defensive pass game coordinator. And one thing about Notre Dame is they played 4-3, regular base 4-3 personnel, and they played regular old cover 4 behind it. Every once in a while they'll spin down and play cover 1 and cover 3, but whether it's stopping the run or covering the pass, they're playing 4 deep. So I'm interested to see if maybe Sark thinks like, okay, we have to have that. It's cool to play cover 1 and cover 3 when you got the dudes, but if we don't, we need to have that as another tool in the toolbox.
All first-time depositors at Monkey Knife Fight that put at least $20 into their account while using promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. So that's a $40 value for just $20. And you'll get that opportunity to turn that $20 into even more money playing daily fantasy football and prop games at one of the fastest growing fantasy sports sites in the USA, in Monkey Knife Fight. Go to Monkey Knife Fight and deposit your $20 with promo code PFF today to receive your free PFF Edge annual subscription. PFF and Sunday Night Football's Chris Collinsworth is teaming up with one of the best players on and off the field, 49ers All-Pro cornerback Richard Sherman. The Chris Collinsworth podcast featuring Richard Sherman is available now wherever you find your podcast. They will provide the most interesting football conversation in sports every week. And sometimes that means the discussion will venture off the field too. Additionally, Chris will be taking a dive into the game of football as he sees it, inviting in the best and brightest to talk about everything that is happening in the great game of football. Mark your calendars. You do not want to miss the best 60 minutes of insight this season. In these uncertain times, life is full of questions like, when should I start thinking about life insurance? But however difficult these questions may be, Western and Southern can help you answer them. Backed by over 130 years of experience, together, we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind. Western and Southern Financial Group. Life insurance, retirement, investments. Now through February 7th, subscribe to PFF's Elite annual subscription using promo code ACTION. That's Spanish for action, ACTION, to receive a year of elite subscription access and 1 year, 365 days of Action Pro subscription access for just $199.99. Action Pro is Action Network's premium subscription offering tailor-made to make avid and new bettors better. I probably should use that. This is a limited time offer that is currently only made available now through the Super Bowl, which is February 7th. This offer only applies to first-time elite annual subscribers. Yeah, and Washington's had those dudes, especially on the outside, for a few years now, honestly.
Yeah, some of their safety classes have been like ridiculous. Like true exactly. NFL guys, 3-4 deep with NFL guys.
And so just relative to the Pac-12, I mean, that is a step above what the receiving class cores that they're going to see, on their schedule. That's not going to be the case anymore. The thing you say about Notre Dame, I do think the thing with, I like what they did at Notre Dame this year with the guy who just mentioned, who I've already forgotten his name, and Clark Lee. But so they're a 4-3, but I think because you have that guy that Jeremiah Owusu-Karamoah, who's like both. It's a 4-2-5, but it's also a 4-3 because he's an alien, right?
Yeah, he's an alien.
But I think the interesting thing for me is the second alien on that team. Okay, he's not an alien because I shouldn't put him in the same class, but I really like 14 Kyle Hamilton. Yes. And now you're able to use that player as a piece to say, when we don't want to be in cover 4, quarters, whatever, too high stuff, now we can move that piece around, have him come to the box. He does everything. So just to see if they go try and find both those type of players.
Yes.
Like you mentioned, if they're going to run some of that Notre Dame stuff that you talked about, they're losing some players though. That is scary. Like Joseph Asai, I believe is gone. The 9-year starting quarterback is gone. Right. And then we said this whole season, like, hey, this is the year, man, because we didn't know anything about Spencer Rattler. We weren't sure about Iowa State because Brock Purdy didn't have a great sophomore year, and honestly didn't have a great junior year, but they still won a lot of games. We didn't know about a lot of these teams. And Texas still couldn't get over the hump. And obviously that's why Tom Herman is not the coach anymore.
Yep.
Now the problem is, now you have Brock Purdy, who you never know, might rebound and become this really great quarterback like he was as a freshman.
Yep.
He's coming back. And then, dude, this kid out of Oklahoma, Spencer Rattler, he's going to be insane. Yeah. He already is. He already grades on a throw for throw basis, he grades super high in our system, like 92, something like that, for like a guy who's this first year in the system, only second year on campus, like unbelievable. And I think we both agree, especially talking to some of the guys that we talk to a lot of, that he still hasn't clicked yet, like totally.
Right. He still doesn't really get it.
Yeah,
he's just talented.
Once he gets it, it's over. Yeah. So now it's like, Texas, dude, you had your chance. Yeah, okay, you're hyped up, you're excited. I would be too for all these new changes because I like Sark a lot. But now you're dealing with probably a better conference than it was last year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, looking now at some of the players, almost all of their best guys who left outside of like Brennan Eagles, they're all defensive guys. So it's gonna be tough. You know, year one is going to be about them having to outscore teams. They just don't have the same kind of talent. So to your point, this was supposed to be the year for Herman where, hey, you're bringing back a lot of the guys that you recruited to start with. That was part of, you know, some of your best recruiting classes. It's time now, you know, and they obviously did not produce at the level that we all had expected. So I am interested to see, you know, from an offensive perspective for them, are they going to be able to generate explosive offense? Because that's really what's going to be the difference for them.
Yeah, because they're not going to be able to, like, you know, if he's going to go and run, and he probably will, you know, he's going to be in the pistol. He's going to run outside zone. You know, he's going to try and stretch it and stuff like that. They're going to run counter. You're not busting off what you're busting off there in the run game like what you are with that O-line and Najee Harris.
Yeah.
And even, like, the backup who's going to be an NFL player, Robinson.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that's a tough thing. Like, you got to create explosives. Hopefully, you know, this is the PFF College Football Podcast, so we have to say it. Run a lot of play action, dude. Motion and play action. You're already there, so don't stop now.
Exactly.
All right, talking about players coming back or not coming back. Let's go to Chris Olave, who surprised everybody by announcing he's coming back to Ohio State this year. Probably a first-round receiver, though. I think receivers are always weird because, especially like these days, you get there's like always going to be like a cluster of them. There's like a group 1 cluster and the group 2 cluster. So you don't know if it'll be late first round, early second, maybe we're like a Michael Pittman win, that type of thing.
Right.
He probably would have went in that range. He's probably one of the tier 2 cluster of receivers, but now he comes back, and if Ohio State finds a quarterback, they could be playing for the national championship again.
I mean, their top 2 receivers come back. Their tight ends are coming back. You know, some of their best linemen are coming back. You know, everybody basically except for Wyatt Davis, you know, as far as their best offensive guys, and Justin Fields, obviously. If they have a guy who can throw the ball, and if that Quinn Ewers kid is what I've been told he is, then, you know, he'll have plenty of weapons to throw to, you know. It's going to be interesting, though, and I was definitely caught off guard by this, especially by some of the San Diego sources I had and what I heard about, you know, where he was leaning before the game. So clearly something's happened. I mean, to your point, he is not a clear-cut, like, top 1, top 2 guy in this class. There are a lot of guys with a similar skill set. You know, you have your Kadarius Tonys and other guys who kind of fit that shifty, fast, you know, take the top off the defense type of guy. So it does become easy for a guy like Olave to hear anything from, oh, you're the second best receiver on our board to you're like number 9 or number 10. We might not be able to get to you until the end of the second round type of thing. So if that's the case, you know, why battle it out with that? Come back, he'll produce. You know, he's going to be playing on another elite team at Ohio State. And maybe then, you know, he can come back out on the other end, you know, and probably be able to, you know, lead or be close to leading his class.
They always, now, when you can recruit at the level they do and you pick and choose wherever you want, this can happen. But what we'll say is, like, they always have great compliments in terms of receiver, right? So now with you talk about a shifty type of a lab person, and then Garrett Wilson is like that's a guy. That's a dude right there. That's a dude. Like an all-everything type of X type of player. Not that they use him as like a true X. Like, and we've talked about this before. You know, Ryan Day doesn't care so much about where guys are lined up to a certain degree. He just wants to run.
But he could do it if they needed him to do it. He could do it with no problem.
Yeah, exactly. He's that good. And so I agree. Just finding the quarterback. The defense is going to be good. Again, because they're losing an important member, so that'll make them a little better next year. And, I should say that. I gotta cut that shit. And so that's Chris Olave. Now, Clemson also returning a lot of players. All 11 players from the defense that got schmucked by Ohio State in the semifinal coming back. This is like so perfect for them to go on this insane run because of how pissed off Brent Venables is, not just a month ago in the semifinals, but it continues to be to this day. If you want to go find Brent Venables right now, I'm sure he would be sleepless and upset at himself.
Yes.
Like, the quarterback is there. That's the crazy thing. It's like with Clemson, there's no guessing on the quarterback. When you you lose, I'm not saying that DJ is going to be Trevor Lawrence, but we know that the floor is still super high. Mm-hmm. So you're not guessing on that, and now you're returning, and we know how important returning production is. So yeah, what do you think about Clemson defense going to next year? And like, what do you think Venable's next move is schematically? Like let's take your brain into 3D right now.
Oh, so that's a good question. So with all their, first of all, like, I don't think that he's had this much defensive talent since maybe the 2017 or 2018 team, like that Kelly Bryant team that clearly had like an elite, only giving up maybe like 13, 14 points per game style of defense, but couldn't score. Like, that's probably the level of production that we're looking at coming back. I was joking with you before the show started that Nolan Turner is automatically going to be the oldest player in college football. He's on his 6th season of eligibility now. So everybody should pray that he doesn't hurt himself and get a 7th year on some medical red shirt or something like that. But yeah, I mean, they're bringing everything back from a scheme perspective. That's where it gets really interesting, because if I had to guess, they might be a 3-4 team next year. I think that their defensive line group is extremely talented. But when you look at the body types, there's not really a Cleveland Farrell, or an obvious pass rusher that they can sit at one end and say, hey, you've got no other job except for to go after the quarterback. They've got great interior linemen. Xavier Thomas, I believe the other guy's name is Brees, the one that's a freshman that everybody raved about all year. So the talent is there up front. He always has, a stable of linebackers, and their linebacking core has been starting and getting a lot of reps, between Skalski and Spector. Like, those guys have played a lot.
So much, dude.
They've played a lot of football. So, and all the safeties and DBs that they were playing with last year outside of Turner were all extremely young. They were all freshmen and sophomores. So having that much back on defense, it's going to be hard to score on them next year.
Kendrick I think it's Kendrick who had just converted to 2 DB.
Yep.
We saw a guy like Andrew Booth, super athletic. And then you have a guy, like you said, like Nolan Turner, who's back there calling the shots. It was Nolan Turner who was out for the first half, right?
Yes, he was one of that.
Yeah. And that was the big narrative, right? Like, oh, well, they don't have the guy there who's making all the calls. And then, like, I think it was more than just that, but let's play into the narrative. Look what happened. They couldn't get lined up, and Ohio State gashed them. So that's not going to happen with all 11 coming back.
Right.
That's huge, man. Clemson is returning all 11 players on one side of the ball. That's not supposed to happen.
I mean, they were going to go like 11-1 or 12-0 anyways. And now, and now I'm saying like it's 11-1 with a bullet. Like, this is the ACC championship team before they ever even get to fall camp.
And Notre Dame is not in the conference anymore.
Exactly.
I mean, I think Notre Dame probably takes a step back next season.
Yeah.
But still, that's a team that recruits well and can compete with them. It's going to be up to
it's just Georgia. It's just Georgia that's in the way. If they can clear that week 1 game,
they're probably they're I was going to say my boy Sam Howell maybe
they're losing way too much, man. They're losing.
I know it's tough, man. Yeah. The skill position is just rough, and they're like those backs, Carter and Williams. The offensive line not great there. They made runs out of nothing a lot. Right. I mean, both of them had like a missed tackles forced per play stat where they were both in the top 5 in the country last year, or like both top 10 at least.
I was going to say, they're not just making 7-yard runs out of nothing. We're talking like 35-yard runs out of nothing. That you don't just replace that type of player.
But I think Sam Howell is really good. That was my only thing is like he might be the number 1 pick in the 2022 draft. So like that might be especially if your boy Keaton doesn't progress like we all thought he was going to, then I think somehow will.
It's over for that guy, man.
It's honestly at this point, like I was so hyped for him, and that hasn't panned out. So 2021 first overall pick, it's Sam Howell or Spencer Rattler. At this point, like it's gonna change because Joe Burrow 2 is gonna come out of nowhere. But like
as it stands right now, yeah, those are probably the two leading the conversation going into next season.
All right, let's move on to the LSU Tigers, who are still on the lookout for a defensive coordinator. They went and got Jake Peets, and DJ Mangus came back to run the offense. And then they thought they had Marcus Freeman coming over from Cincinnati. He ends up going to Notre Dame. They thought they had Ryan Nielsen coming over from the Saints, and Sean Payton says, no, I'm keeping him. Are we going to see Will Muschamp as the defensive coordinator for LSU once again? Okay, I say that as a joke, but I've been talking to some people, and we all agree, like, Will Muschamp is a hell of a defensive coach. Mm-hmm. Didn't work in South Carolina or Florida, okay. Hell of a defensive coach, and I think everything you hear about him, he is fiery, I understand it. Maybe he yells more than I yelled when I was coaching, but he seems to, what I understand is that he seems to care about his players. So if Muschamp does happen, I think I'm okay with that as an LSU fan. But with that said, I mean, like, dude, we're getting up there in days now. Like, they need to. Is there anyone on your radar that like defenses that you've noticed this season, last couple of years that you're like, all right, this guy would be interesting. That's not really talked about, or even maybe Muschamp. Maybe it is Muschamp. I don't know. I don't want to not get excited for Muschamp, but it's going to be hard to get excited for Muschamp, even though I just said I liked him.
If we're talking best candidates right now, it's probably Pruitt and Muschamp. I mean, if we're being real. I mean, all the guys, we've talked about some of the other guys that were kind of the hotter candidates. You know, the Freeman guy from Cincinnati, like, that would have been a huge get for them because it would have been very much like a return to what they were doing when they were at their best with the Randa, as far as, like, odd front, cover one, sending pressure from all different angles. Like, that would have been ideal, dream scenario. Nielsen would have helped, obviously, because I like what he does. He's somebody who, unlike what Bo Pelini was this year, like, he's been able to find a way to succeed playing two high and single high. So, again, that's something that could have kind of carried over from the best of what Aranda did. So if you're looking for something like that, your best bet probably is Muschamp and Pruitt. Because at least then that there's a baseline that you're going to achieve defensively.
It would just be tough. It would be a tough sell because you're going from Bo Pelini to either Muschamp or Pruitt. And Pruitt, I don't know. Is anyone going to take I think we're a few weeks away from knowing anything about.
It's going to be about a month before we know exactly what Pruitt's situation is.
So then I wonder, it's like, what if a guy like Jake Bateman in North Carolina, who's done some good stuff at Army and at North Carolina. I don't know. Like, there's.
I mean, that would be interesting, but some of, like, the 3 safety softer coverage stuff, I get really concerned when you start talking about these explosive offenses that can turn these shallow crosses into 35-yard gains. Like, it's one thing just saying we're playing soft because we only got one or two elite opponents on our schedule. Man, it's asking a lot of your defense.
Yeah, 3 safety stuff when you're getting, like, bubble to one side, RPO glance plus, Q bash, like,
right. And it's a 5-star running back that, is in the backfield. It's just, that's a lot,
It's a lot. So yeah, that's my thing with LSU is, like, I think they could even, like, now I'm, like, looking back and I'm like, well, just give Bo Pelini another shot. Because it can't be as bad as last year either, right? Now you're going to get a second year in the system. Like, that's not happening clearly, but, like, now I'm like, screw it. Just give it back to Bo Pelini, and we'll. What were your thoughts on Bo Pelini this year? We haven't talked about that before. Like, what do you think went wrong? Do you think he is a Division I or a P5 coordinator and just went all wrong with the lack of talent, especially in terms of, like, players that left the program to the draft and to transfer after last offseason? Like, do you think it was okay, or do you think it was, like, absolute shambles? They needed to fire him. Like, that's it.
Okay, so if I want to be as fair as possible to Bo Pelini, what I would say is you turned over like 3 of your 4 defensive backs, and you didn't get the best season. Derek Stingley wasn't even available all year, and clearly was not at 100% when he was there. So, it's almost like you lost basically 3/4 of your defensive backfield. You lost a first-round level linebacker in Patrick Queen.
The other linebacker playing a lot of snaps for Cleveland, Phillips.
Exactly. So on that alone, just on loss of talent, it was going to be tough. And then, obviously everybody has had to play through what this COVID season has been. But for a first-year defensive coordinator, losing all that talent, it's a brand new scheme, and you don't really get a spring ball. You don't get a real spring ball. You don't get a real fall camp. Like, you could tell in that Mississippi State game, it looked like they had maybe practiced their defense maybe only like a handful of times based on like where the coverages were busting. There were coverage busts that just don't happen in the kind of coverages that he runs, which tells me that he clearly didn't get enough time in. From what I heard, that's kind of what the problem was, is that there was more to his defense that was not being, installed or maybe not being understood. So, I think that this might have just been kind of like a flash in the pan type of thing. Everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. It was already going to be a rough season, championship hangover, turning over as much of the roster as they had, losing offensive and defensive staff members. It was going to be hard regardless. It was not helped by, what this was leading up into the season and how little of the defense it seemed like he had actually installed prior to the season starting.
So when Clay Helton gets fired, you're gonna want Bo Pelini to come? This is what it sounds like. He's a very pro Bo Pelini podcast all of a sudden.
I don't know if USC's defense can be fixed, man. I was very happy about Todd Orlando, and it feels like we have the exact same problems that we have with Clancy Pendergast. So I don't know if those issues can be fixed. I am more interested in hearing about you from the offensive perspective, because it seemed like they were still trying to take shots downfield, so I don't think that they ever really lost that element. Obviously, you don't have as precise of a quarterback as you used to. You don't have Jamar Chase for the year. You don't have Justin Jefferson or Thaddeus Moss or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So was it just a personnel thing in your mind? Was it a scheme change? Like, do you think bringing back some guys who were around for 2019 will be the difference, or is it something else?
No, because I think that they would have been fine. Like, with who we assume is coming back next year, and we assume Miles Brennan is going to be healthy next year. I think they honestly would be fine if it was Ensminger and Scott Linehan again. Like, I think they would have been fine. I think the loss of Brennan, they were scoring points with Brennan, dude. He was playing. That was the most surprising thing for me, was that how good Brennan was, because we went into the season being like, I don't know.
Right.
Like, he's been around for a long time, but like there was, what I said last offseason was like, hey, there was a reason they went out and got Joe Burrow when he was supposed to be when Brendan was supposed to be the starter. So,
yep.
And then he came in, so we had no clue, and then he came in and it was great. I thought they were running a lot of the same stuff. And then the injury happens, and they really had to pare it down first for TJ Finley, and then Max Johnson probably put a bit more in. TJ Finley,
he just didn't have it,
He just didn't have it.
He's
not ready yet. Just not ready yet. Love watching those. This is my favorite type of quarterback to watch, is the guys who are a little thicker but have that very overhand release.
Yes.
So like Byron Leftwich, there's actually the kid out in South Alabama. I just remember this kid. I forgot his name, but their quarterback there.
The guys who throw like they're trying to put the ball through a wall.
That's exactly it. Yeah. That's exactly it. These like tall, thick boys who just throw with that complete overhand release. So that's why, like, aesthetically, I love TJ Finley. I don't know if it was there for him. Missed a lot of throws. Stood around the pocket probably a little too much. So I think if Brendan comes back, they're fine. So if you just want to, you're going to end up with the same concepts anyways. Like they might add some newer stuff. I mean, now that we're talking about guys who, Pete's coming from the NFL, DJ Mangus now having been a season in the NFL. So they might add some just more in terms of formationally, because we remember 2019 LSU. I mean, they ran one formation the whole year. It was basically 3-by-2, and sometimes the 3 was bunched. Like, that was it, right? Yeah. Back, whether the back was out in an actual empty formation or he was weak Like it's 3x2. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's the same shit. So I think the offense is gonna be fine. Obviously, losing the offensive line returns a lot. Austin Deculus is returning. The receiving core, even without Terrace Marshall going into the last couple of games of this year, and then obviously next year, Keyshawn Butte. Woo! Let me tell you something. That's Jamar Chase again. I mean, not the physical guy, but maybe a little bit faster. But like he wears that number 1, plays X. Right. I was like, I couldn't believe what I was watching. So I'm excited. Like you can tell in my voice, I'm excited for LSU offense. 2021, and the defense, honestly, whoever they find is going to have some good pieces to work with. So I think that'll be.
I agree. I mean, Ricks is a dude.
They're going to have the 2 corners.
You've got Stingley. Like you've got some. If you just with that alone, you have something to work with. Yeah. If you know you got 2 guys you can play 1-on-1 with, I can go make up a defense for that.
Would have been great for Aranda's defense. Type 4, baby. Type 4 for life.
All day. All day.
All right, that's enough college football. Let's get into the NFL for a bit because we do have some big important games this weekend. AFC Championship, Kansas City at Buffalo. And then Green Bay hosts Tampa Bay on the NFC side. You have thoughts about Greg Roman. Let's get to that because I know you were upset watching the game, the Bills Ravens game on the weekend. What is your problem with Greg Roman?
So, honestly, I could let the Greg Roman thing go if I wasn't being gaslighted by John Harbaugh, dude. It made me so upset that he really went out in front of a microphone and said, we have all the concepts. The argument is not whether or not you have the plays in your playbook. Like that's not the argument for me. I put out the joke tweet that, hey, running all verts out of empty isn't working. What's the next play? And sure enough, they went quads and ran all verts. That part is what bothers me. It's the feel for the game, the ability to generate easy throws for 1 and explosive throws for 2. That's really what's killing me about the offense. And I'm looking at the bar chart right now. The average for explosive plays passing this year was about 92 for each team. So over the course of the season, not only is Baltimore last, guess what? Guess how many explosive pass plays they have, Seth, if you haven't looked.
So the average is 92. Give me number 1. What's number 1?
So the number 1 team this year was Kansas City with 129.
Okay, so Baltimore's at 54.
You actually undershot them. They're at 61.
Okay? But that's still
the next team, which is the Giants, which nobody would say by any stretch of the imagination.
Dude, the Giants didn't score a touchdown for like 10 years, dude.
That's what I'm saying. And they had 10 more explosive pass plays than Baltimore did. New England had almost 20 more explosive passing plays, and they had one of the most anemic offenses in the NFL. So that on its own kind of goes to show that it's not enough just to say we're calling vertical passing concepts. Because if you look at just how many times they attempt downfield throws, they're on the higher end. I believe they're in the top 10, the top 8 in the NFL as far as that goes. That's not the issue. The issue is, are you generating passing plays that's allowing guys to maybe catch the ball in the 8 to 12 yard range and then turn it into a 15+ yard play? So that's really it. It's a feel for the game thing. The first drive when they were on the script and kind of mashing them up front, I was like, perfect. This is going to set up your explosive plays down the line, and it's not costing you having to run Lamar 15, 20 times. And then the longer the game went on, I was like, okay, where's the explosive play? Here's where the explosive play should come. Doesn't come. Okay, maybe next drive. Here's where it should come. Doesn't come. And then finally they start putting the drive together, and you have that pick 6. And you could tell after that, like, there was clearly that was whatever they had in that last drive was all they had left on the play sheet, And now obviously Lamar gets a concussion at the end of the third, and then that was that. But it's just the lack of generation of explosive offense. I think that they've done a great job putting together an efficient and explosive run game. But now it's time for the next step. At some point, somebody has to say enough is enough and to make the next step offensively.
I think one of the issues is not to really defend Greg Roman. Honestly, I don't care. Like, I'm neutral about him. I really don't care. But, like, you have to find this balance. And it's really hard because when I look at, I look at stuff from a passing game perspective, because this is how I see football. Mm-hmm. So I go and I watch them the last 2 weeks against Tennessee and Buffalo, and I look at first down, and I look at the coverages that they're getting, and I'm like, dude, it's there for you, man. It's there for you. But then you have to have the only reason you're getting those coverages is because you're mashing it. Yeah. Well, that too. Okay. That was my next point. Yes. But my first point was that because you're mashing teams, mm-hmm. and you're an option football team. That's what you are. You're a modern NFL option football team. So, and playing against Titans. I love this Titans, the way the Titans played them, even though they lost the game. Because I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, that's what we would do if I was coaching high school defense. Yep. I was playing against an option team. Yep. Tight front 3-4, 2 high safeties that are triggering, or two like medium safeties, whatever you want to call it, that are triggering in either direction to get an extra fitter in there. Instead of I've talked about this before. Instead of like spinning, playing an option team, you don't really want to actually spin to one high, right? Because then you're limited to that, like, let's say 8-man box, because the deep safety and the 2 corners are off. When you play too high and you trigger them fast, now you actually have 2 extra guys in the fit. Yep. I sound like a defensive coordinator. Jesus, we're plus 2 will be proud of you. So I'm looking at the Titans game. I'm like, dude, first down play action is done. Trigger them. Now you have one-on-ones on the outside. They're off. So now you have you can run across the field. You can run. They're hit, Marquise Brown on a couple, like a speed out, because they're so off. Like, you can do that stuff with the Bills. It's similar stuff. And one of the things I found when I was researching for my article that came out today on their need for a receiver, and I guess one of the reasons why I wrote it that way was, I'm going through the Bills tape, and I'm like, they don't respect whoever is playing one-on-one on the outside.
No.
And it's not like we're talking about like Levi Wallace here playing one-on-one, like who's like a good player, but he's not Trey White on the other side.
Exactly.
So I'm like, what's going on here? So like now you're staying in that 2 high safety thing where you're getting 2 extra fitters in the run game. Mm-hmm. And now it's a pass, and that safety who's to the side of the single receiver doesn't even look over there. He's not even trying to see what's going on one-on-one X receiver type shit. He's looking inside. He's doing, he's quote unquote poaching inside. Right. So I'm like, dude, you can't let teams do that to you. Go get me Chris Godwin. No, I guess not Chris Godwin, because he's more of a slot, but still, go get me Allen Robinson.
Type, right.
Go get me Allen Robinson. Go get me an X, or draft one, I guess. But you don't know what you're gonna get when you draft a guy, right? Like, and we know Allen Robinson is good. That would be such an amazing fit, because you don't allow defenses to play you in the ways that defenses are playing. The defense now you're playing 5. Now you're forcing Lamar to drop back and look at 3 to 5. Sorry, 3 versus 5. His 3 receivers to the trip side.
Right.
And they've pushed 5 over there defensively. It's tough, man, every time. That's tough, man.
Absolutely. I think, obviously, I give Marquise Brown a hard time. Because it's funny to me, because he's short. It's just because he's short, and I'm sorry to height shame, all of our short listeners. But, I mean, there is just like an unquestioned truism about football. It's won by the biggest and the strongest and the fastest. Okay. And it's not that Marquise is too slow to win.
Perfect number 2 receiver.
But come on, man. He's
even 5'9". I'm not even sure yet. That's a whole nother story.
He's 5'9". I'm sorry. If you're telling me that your best receiving option is 5'9", and he's not playing above the rim and going and winning at, the high point, then what am I supposed to do if it's 3rd and 6 and you're getting tight coverage? You're asking too much of your quarterback. That's really what it comes down to. It's not like they need to have, AJ Green and T. Higgins. You don't need to go out and get Julio Jones and Mohamed Sanu. It doesn't have to be, Julio Jones and Taylor Gabriel. It doesn't have to be this perfect, grouping of receiving talent. I just need one. Just one dude that the defense can't guard one-on-one, and it opens up the entire playbook for you.
my concern with Hollywood Brown going forward is I think they will eventually at least try to find a nice X so that, Hollywood could be a number 2. Is he even Ted Ginn?
I would say no. If we're talking about like the best of Ted Ginn, I don't even think he's been close to that yet. Like Carolina Ted Ginn, best of New Orleans Ted Ginn, I don't even think that he's touched that yet.
Is he? My concern with him is just I don't see the speed anymore. What happened to it? He's not. He can't run away from people.
There were a few plays. I think he caught. It might have been a broken play where Lamar extended and just found him after scrambling.
He should have gained 25 yards right there.
It was like 8 or 9 yards of space. All the fast guys in the NFL break that into an enormous play. Like, that is the dream scenario. I catch the ball and I don't have a guy on my body right now. I'm going to turn up my speed. You see Tyreek Hill turn those types of, scramble drill catches into 35-yard gains all the time. And to just see him end up having to run himself out of bounds because he can't get away from anybody. I was like, oh, that's odd. You don't see that from the speed guys.
And I don't know if I like Mark Andrews a lot, but I don't know if he's not freaky enough. I don't think he's really good, not freaky enough to like change what a defense is going to do to you.
Mm-hmm. He is. What was the tight end that Brent Selleck? That's who he reminds me of. He reminds me of Brent's like a perfectly fine tight end. If you only got to target him 4 or 5 times a game, perfect. You want to find him when the defense forgets about him. He catches the ball in that 8 to 10 yard area and punishes the defense just enough to where a safety's got to stay and have eyes and open up something behind him. But he cannot be your lead tight end receiving option. 1, he drops the ball too much. And 2, it's not like he's an explosive play threat. You can't line him up as the X receiver, and actually have him be honored by a corner. Nobody has to guard that guy with a corner. So the same way that the Chiefs have with Travis Kelce, and obviously that's perfect world scenario, but you want to have that type of option if you're going to be playing out of 12 personnel and 22 personnel, all the time the way that the Ravens do. You're going to want that guy because it does add another element to your offense.
Okay, so the team that the Ravens lost to, the Buffalo Bills, playing in the first AFC Championship game since, I guess, 93, I believe. Mm-hmm. But 93 or 94. Josh Allen's unbelievable jump. I can't even believe the jump he's made, just accuracy-wise. I've said this before, I don't even care to find out how. Because it makes no sense that he's this accurate. He went on, I think, Pat McAfee's radio show and talked about how he learned how to sequence his throws better. Mm-hmm. So in terms of all the muscles firing in the right sequence, so hip to this to that, whatever.
Right.
And he found that before the hip, they were doing some stuff where they could literally see the muscles firing as he was throwing it. Right. They hooked them up to whatever, and they were saying that his hips were not firing at all. And I think what happens is when your hips aren't firing in a stable way, all of a sudden that elbow moves around too much, your head moves around too much, your core moves around too much, and you're throwing the ball in places that you didn't think you were throwing it to because you thought you were down the middle, but you're not.
Exactly. Now you're sailing the ball or throwing way behind guys.
All of a sudden that's not happening anymore. I said this before, I'll say it again. Throwing to his right is insane this year because righties throwing to their right is hard because it's hard to get your feet all the way around to your throwing side where it's set for your target. So you end up with your feet kind of still down the middle, and then it's all arm.
Oh, so you're throwing with only your upper body. You're basically cutting your lower body off from your throwing motion.
Exactly that. So now Allen has just become better. Some of it does have to do with understanding to still fire the hips first and stay stable as you're throwing the football rather than leaning in a direction. But just his ability to, even if I don't get my feet around to the right, I'm still making these unbelievable throws on crossing routes to that side, to anybody, to Diggs, to whoever, even on the run. I talked about this yesterday with Michael Kist. He was rolling to his right, he's like 150 passer rating or something stupid like that. I thought both the Colts and the Ravens had look. They only scored 17 points against the Ravens. Thought both teams had a good game plan against them. Offensive line was solid both games, and you cannot tackle this guy in the backfield.
Okay, so you just stole my point. That is like obviously for everything that we just covered, those are the most important things.
Yeah.
But like the situations that used to kill him all the time was pressure from a speed guy. Now he thinks that, I've got to find my hot throw, and now the ball's all over the place, right? So it makes him look, he was just very inaccurate under those scenarios. Now that he seems to have a little bit more confidence about himself in the pocket, I'm realizing like it doesn't matter who it is. The first guy can't tackle this dude. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I'm seeing defensive linemen, linebackers, DBs that have this dude dead to rights and just bouncing off of him. Like, if he can do that and he's accurate enough where after he extends his play, he can still find his receivers on target. You know, that drive against the Colts in his 2-minute drill where he was finding guys up the sideline over and over again. I'm like, okay, there was no other point in his entire football life where that's what he was doing. You know, you can find plenty of plays of him finding a post route, that got behind the safety. He can do that in his sleep. But stuff like the play breaks down or I need to turn a 4-second progression into a 5.5-second progression. Now he's able to be accurate in those situations. It does. I think even I underrated how much more that would do for his game once he had that figured out. I thought maybe he'd be an okay quarterback. He looks like, a freak. He looks like a freak right now.
I think having Dable there every year that he's been there, and now again next year, that helps. So not having to learn new verbiage, not having to learn new ideas of what. When we see this, we want to do this. Right. Like we want to slide it this way instead of you bring the back. Like just simple stuff like that. Like knowing how you're going to deal with the different looks you're getting, being comfortable in how he wants the dropbacks to be, who's the primary, the same concepts they're running a lot of. Now Dable changed his offense. I remember watching that first year and they're trying to run all Patriot stuff with like Kelvin Benjamin as the X guy, and it was
not happening.
But so he's changed it a bit, but at the same time, like having that continuity has been, I think, super important to his development.
And one last thing to tie it back to Baltimore. I think that the difference between those two offenses is what I brought up earlier. They have a guy that you can't guard one-on-one.
Yeah,
it is done. Yeah. It has done so much for Allen and his throwing profile now, and it does so much for the Cole Beasleys. It does a lot for Devin Singletary and their running game. When you have to honor a guy who can play both in the slot and outside that you can't guard with your nickel, your safety, your best corner, your second best corner, if it takes 2 sets of eyes to cover that guy, it does so much more for your offense. So, you get to we all kind of got to see that when Buffalo needed to play, they could go get it. They didn't have a lot. They couldn't get a lot of them, but the ones they absolutely had to have, they could go get those.
And so the Colts, being the zone defense that they are, or playing mostly zone, they kind of took away Diggs in a lot of ways. Now Diggs has the most receiving yards after like 2 playoff games in like a long time. So I'm not saying they took him away, but just being able to, hey, we're gonna play with deep. I put this on Twitter, but like 2 deep banks of zone defenders, right? And we're gonna give you the underneath stuff, and you just got to take it. Like that's on you to take it. So that's how you can eliminate or try and suppress a great receiver in Diggs. And then, the opposite is with the Ravens, because it's so much, one high man and stuff like that. They bracketed him quite a few times.
Yeah.
And Allen was able to find, they don't always hit it, but he's able to get to that next receiver. There's a play in the end zone to Gabe Davis that he could have hit on a post because the safety came down and bracketed him. There's a play where they bracketed both Beasley and Diggs, and I think that might have been a play where Allen was able to make a play. So, doing stuff like that. All right, talking about bracketing good receivers, the team they play against has some very good receiving threats.
Yeah.
I know you absolutely love. Well, I mean, you're an Andy Reid guy. You're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so you grew up with Andy Reid, and now what his offense now is. It's like. I shouldn't say this. So you tell me he was a West Coast guy. This is not the West Coast offense anymore. Not even close.
Right.
To a certain degree, right? Maybe the verbiage is the same. I don't know. But like they're doing stuff that is so. Was it always like this, or was he more of that true West Coast guy? At least near the end of the Philadelphia tenure.
That the Vic, Jeremy Maclin, Deshaun Jackson, Brent Selleck, and LaShawn McCoy. Like when that was the core. That was only the beginning, because even then you were not seeing things like Brent Selleck is the X, and a tight alignment. Yeah. LaShawn McCoy is outrunning these routes, to the weak side, and then they're running vertical stuff on the other end. Could they have done it? And there was a little bit of that, but it was still a little bit more true. We'll go into two backs when we want to run the ball. We'll run our typical play action stuff. And then if you make us go drop back, then we've got guys that can punish you for it. What they're doing right now, like, I don't have a point of comparison. There is no point of comparison
I agree.
For that in the NFL. The way that they can get explosive plays almost out of thin air. Like, nobody else is doing that.
Yeah, and I like, my thing for them is how they're always trying to create that weak side triangle, man.
Yes.
Like, everything is coming back to that, either a receiver playing out isolated on the weak side, or like you said, Kelsey as like the Y ISO. Everything comes back to him being able to find that like a triangle between three receivers after they've ran their pass concepts to the weak side. It's crazy how often they do that. I think they talked about it. I think Romo talked about it during the game. How when Tyreek Hill is playing number 3, I actually looked these stats up. So I want, because my whole thing was I hope I'm gonna look this up, and I know Tyreek Hill is number 1 in the league when he plays as that number 3, and it wasn't quite right, but for me he is, because you got to do everything in your power to stop him from running the crossing route. And maybe that's why he doesn't grade very high, because every team has to deal with that, and they're doing an okay job. But we saw it right away, man. Play cover one, 4-man rush, with a rat who was a low linebacker. It's done.
It's not enough.
It's over. You can't do it.
It's not enough.
The interesting thing, and I talked about this when it happened, was, if you're gonna play man, we don't have time right now to talk about divider leverage, but like if you're going, so when the guy is lined up that far inside as the number 3 receiver to the innermost slot out of 2, you're probably playing the guy covering him outside leverage, because there's all this room outside. Right. And you're like, okay, well, if I have a linebacker inside of me who's like roaming as a robber, and I have a safety on top of me, I'm going to funnel him that way. Well, guess what? You're funneling him into where he wants to go. He wants to get all the way across the field deep. So the Patriots, for example, switch that up. You don't see this often or ever. They played the guy inside and said, hey, go run outside. We don't care. Yeah. Like, because just do something, like, as we always say with Belichick, like, do something that we haven't seen. Beat us with something else. We don't care.
Exactly.
And we talked about this too, is you keep you stay in too high as long as you can, and whether you stay in too high and have that safety with eyes on the strong side, or you rotate down to what we'd say, 6 buzz,
right,
and have him kind of as a robber type of player. You do that. So I get, so then this lends itself into my question, which is like, how the fuck do you stop these guys?
I mean, you kind of touched on it with.
Oh, and by the way, you're trying to deal with all that, and I mean, Sammy didn't play, but Sammy Watkins, Clyde, Le'Veon, Mecole Hardman, and Travis Kelce on the field.
I was just going to say, so like, you brought up the old Eagles offenses. Imagine if all 4 of the receiving threats were Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin. Like, that's what you're dealing with. And to your point about playing like cover 3 and especially the cover 1 stuff with divider leverage, like, you can funnel a guy all you want, You're funneling a 4-2 guy. Where are you funneling him to that he does not want to go to? So that's really, you're really kind of touching on how difficult it is to guard these guys, especially when they are actually content to say, hey, if you want to play a soft cover 2 and give us all this underneath stuff, we're not going to play a quick game. We'll just hand it off. I will hand it off and mash you and mash you and mash you. And then the second that you get brave and decide to play cover 1, that's when we can get our downfield stuff. You just can't man these guys. I don't know what you do.
Yeah, I don't have.
The 49ers last year are the closest I have seen a team come to stopping that offense. And even then, they could only really do 2 things, and everybody kind of pointed it out. Hey, when KC is in 3-by-1, they play quarters, but it's really poach, so it might as well still be cover 3, And then if it's not 3-by-1, then they're just in cover 3. And that's fine, if you've got the dudes, and they had the guys to get pressure with 4, but eventually, when you got to go play grown man football and, man up with these guys, it's trouble for you. And that's why, they're by far the number 1 team in the NFL with generating explosive passing plays.
You play poach to 3-by-1 the whole game, and then you just decide, hey, you know what, this time we're going to play cover 3, and they hit you with a 60-yard wasp route when Patrick Mahomes drops back for 20 yards and throws it off his back foot to win the Super Bowl. So what are you going to do?
What do you do? What do you do?
Okay, let's head to the NFC quickly. I know you're happy that the Drew Brees era is over in New Orleans.
Finally. One more old man to eliminate.
Okay, well, which old man would you like to see gone? I guess Brady then.
I think it's Brady. I mean, my pick for the guy to lose would be Brady. And it's not, I have no problem with the way he played this year. I have nothing but respect for what he's done this year, especially the second half of the year when the offense really started, clicking, and it seemed like, okay, he and Arians had kind of found an accord, and he really had a good feel for his receiving core. They've been excellent on offense, but right now, I mean, you posted about it today on Twitter, but where Rodgers is at right now within the framework of that offense,
never
it's like
seen anything like that before.
If Jared Goff is the guy with the high school degree, Aaron Rodgers is the one with the doctorates. Like it's perfect. Like you can watch him play, and even if they're not scoring every drive, you'll go 25 dropbacks of Rodgers before you ever say that he made a mistake. It's completely mistake free. It's not like he's only feeding Adams, It just happens to be that the structure of the offense is that when they need to get the ball to Devontae, they can. But if he's not there, Aaron is so good at finding everybody else. And now, if the run game if that was real, what we saw, then it's really trouble.
Okay, well okay, let's end on this one because I think it's an interesting topic. They ran the ball really well against the Rams defense, who had kind of gotten really good at stopping the run as the year went on.
Right, especially out of too high.
Yes, and this was a very good defense the whole year, but they got better at stopping the run as the season went on, and that took them over the top. And we saw it in the Seahawks game in the playoffs, or I guess all 3 Seahawks games, how much they were able to do that. So now Brandon Staley goes to the Chargers. Do you from what you've seen from the Rams defense? I don't know really where I'm going with this, but I'm watching this. I'll go back. I'm watching this, the way they're playing the Packers. Mm-hmm. It's very different than I've seen at the NFL level.
Yeah,
it's a 5-0 look with the free, with the weak safety coming down in A gap, or just to clean everything up, bumping everything to trips. They're like, hey, we're not going to let you throw a bubble to Devonta Adams, which. Right. I don't know if I would decide I would rather do that than Aaron Jones. I don't know, but so when I look at Staley, and this is what I wrote about this week, was he'll allow himself to he has a structure for sure. It's a 3-4. It's a 2 high. They'll spin it down sometimes, but he'll allow himself to game plan on a weekly basis more than just cosmetic changes.
Right.
Because that's different what they showed against, like I said, against the Packers. They lived in a world that got burned by it because they allowed some big runs.
Right.
When I rewatched it, I saw a lot of big runs happening because you have two in the same gap and you got no one to clean it up.
Right.
It's gonna happen. But that's the world you want to live in.
I was going to say, but I bet if you asked Staley, he'd say he'd do it the exact same way.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee it, even for all of the rushing yards and some of the explosive plays they gave up. I mean, that's been their MO all year. They just happen to get burned in the playoffs, So as far as what I think you'll see with the Chargers, I actually think a really big, and this is one thing that I'm working on now, is trying to see exactly how Derwin James will fit into the defense. Because if he can be used, if his legs are still good enough to where he can play like in the slot and not just be, a box safety or a high safety, if he can still be moved around like that when he's healthy, that would do a lot for them. Some people have kind of brought up to me, the difference in the front structure. And for me, I mean, the Rams played so much nickel this year, even if it looked like maybe like playing a base front out of nickel personnel, they were able to make that work this year. I can't imagine it's going to be trouble for the Chargers because they have so much defensive line talent. If he's got to turn it into a 4-down, then he'll turn it into a 4-down. It's not going to be the end of the world.
Unless you talk to Joey Bosa and he's like, yes, I want to play 4-eye for the whole season and I'm good at it and don't worry about it, I got you, which is not going to happen.
Right.
Then okay, fine. You stick in your 3-4 tight, whatever you want to do. But no, play with two edges. Just play with two edges.
To be real with you, I mean, Joey Bosa did the 4-eye thing at Ohio State when he had one of the best pass rushing seasons we'd ever seen. So.
They did it. He played 4-eye when they played tight against the Ravens in the playoffs in 2018. So he's done it before.
I think that what's going to be interesting for them in comparison to the Rams, I think the Rams have very specific and defined talented players at positions. So you can move Jalen around, but he's a corner. You're really just moving.
He's a man-to-man guy.
Right. You're just moving your best corner around. That's different than saying, hey, my best pass rusher can beat a guard, can beat a tackle, can beat a tight end. It's different than saying my best safety can play on the roof as a half safety, as a quarter safety, or as a slot corner, So that's where I think they'll be really interesting. I want to see if maybe I'm going to really look into his pressures and see if maybe, that's where you find a role for Derwin as he becomes, kind of the super Jamal Adams, a Jamal Adams that can cover, right? A guy who you can put on the edge of the line of scrimmage and can blitz. He can cover out on the slot. He can shut down a tight end. Like we all know what, Derwin James's abilities are. But within this defense, if he can kind of take pieces of what Ramsey did, play on the roof like he's done before, play as a 2-high safety like he has before. That's what's really interesting to me because they have some really flexible pieces. It's going to be different than what the Rams had, but I think it can be just as productive with the Chargers' defensive talent.
Are you are Chargers fan still? Well, I mean, I know you're an Eagles fan, but did you have any connection to them being in San Diego?
I would love to lie to you and say yeah, but I really didn't. I loved the one team I loved was a 14-2 team that lost to the Patriots. That was the team where I was completely in on. And then I was really in because I thought that Schottenheimer had figured out the offense. And then he got fired after they lost to the Patriots. And that was, my one kind of, my step in the door, my door kind of got shut right in my face. But that was the one team. Obviously, LaDainian Tomlinson, Michael Turner, having two, eventual, 1,000-yard, regular 1,000-yard rushers on your team. Lorenzo Neal is, a ridiculously tough fullback. Antonio Gates. You can go back and look at that roster and you could drop that team off right now and they'd be just as effective on offense now as they were then. I'm not going to say that they were ahead of their time. It was just one of those teams they had mastered their personnel and the offense fit all the pieces.
Do you think that, coming back to present day, do you think that it's fair? We're getting into the real questions here with about a minute left before I cut us off. But do you think it's fair that a guy with this little experience, one season as a DC at this level, only 3 before this, I believe, as a position coach, and at that outside linebackers, come on. I'm kidding. I coached outside linebackers. When there's so many other talented people out there, especially on offense, like do you think it's fair that he gets this job just because he looked McVay in the eye? He talked to McVay once.
So, what I will say is, I don't want to say it's unfair, because based on everything that I've read and that I've seen of Staley and that I know of him as a coach, I think that he merits the position based on his approach to the game. My issue is not the fact that somebody interviewed him and thought he was good enough for the job, because to me, he comes across like a guy that's good enough for the job. My issue is that Staley is like the perfect example of the way that the pipeline works if you are actually using these coaching positions to develop coaching talent. There's 1,000 coaches who have been through D3, NAIA, D2, community college, whatever, who have similar thought processes about the game, but wouldn't get in the door. So, for him, good for him that it worked out, that he's been fortunate enough to get the position. But to me, this is just evidence that people are not using the pipeline the way that they should, because there would be more coaching talent like Brandon Staley if the doors were open to more coaches like Brandon Staley that maybe don't fit his exact profile.
So my galaxy brain take is that it's not going to work out in LA with the Chargers, and it'll go be a DC somewhere after. But kind of like Chip Kelly in Philly and then San Francisco, the league is going to be running that's going to be what defense looks like in the NFL going forward. Yep. So yes, I understand that they had two tremendous star players in Ramsey and Donald, but you look at how offenses are right now, and this is what I wrote in my piece, it kind of hit me okay, we're getting this wide zone offense is spreading finally. Because it's not a new offense. We know that, right?
Exactly.
This is an offense that really took off in 97, 98, 96, whatever it was in Denver. And then it didn't really catch on. And what I'm kind of realizing, maybe I'm wrong, but one of the reasons it didn't catch on because the defense didn't allow it to catch on. So now we have this one high defense in the NFL where you want to bring that extra guy in the box? Yeah, our efficiency numbers aren't going to be great when we run wide zone. That's fine, because we're going to create explosives every time we boot off of it. Every time we boot off of it. So now, just like what's happened in college football, the 3-4 comes back because you can steal gaps back running. You can do it in a format front, but for some reason I just love the 3-4 tight front and how the pieces just set into place a little easier. Rather than it being, when you're playing a 4-man front and you're trying to win back gaps with one human being, it's more of a physical game.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a lot to ask, which is why most teams that do that out of 4 down are actually like the Tampa 2 teams, and you ask your linebackers to buy back gaps, not your defensive linemen.
So with the 3-man, the tight stuff, it's more of a one gap thing, but the gaps can, we know we'll get into this in the offseason, I guarantee you, but with the nose is gonna either stay in the front side of the gap, go to the back side of the gap, whatever. So he's 2 gapping, but on the snap he picks one basically. So you can still be able to. It's a little simpler, I think, and less physically demanding on the individual player. So I think and it's the tight front is a great zone stopper. Anytime you're going to get a 3-4 where it's either a 5 down or a 3 down like that, it's a great zone stopper. And then the 2 high stuff eliminates all the crossing routes. So it's like that wide zone offense came in and became successful because what defense was doing, and now this defense has to come in to stop the wide zone. So as I'm saying, I think 5 years from now, this is what teams are doing, and now it's going to be up to the offense to figure out
what the next evolution is. Yeah.
Sure. All right. So that was us here at the BFF College Football Podcast. covered a lot of stuff today. Hope you like it. And we will see you as of next week. We will see you Tuesday morning. Making a little schedule change. So you will see us Tuesday morning. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.